Good morning and welcome to the All Together podcast, your love first connection, anytime, anywhere. Today.Church is meeting at the Ironworks College location this morning at 10 a.m. You can get there early for the full menu. And this podcast is to help you stay connected if you can't be there all together. Today.Church is anytime, anywhere, Jesus people gather, love first. We are continuing our series in Philippians, going verse by verse with the title, Choose Jesus, Choose Joy. Today's focus is your light shining, and we'll be reading from Philippians 2, 12 through 19, as Paul challenges us to live in obedience and unity so that we shine as lights in a dark world, holding on to the word of life, Jesus himself. Our vision verses from Isaiah 60, 1 through 2. Arise, shine, for your light arrives. The splendor of the Lord, or the splendor of Yahweh, shines on you. For look, darkness covers the earth, and deep darkness covers the nations. But Yahweh shines on you. His splendor appears over you. You see, God's glory shines on his people, empowering them to reflect his light in a world filled with darkness. That's what Jesus came to instruct us and empower us to do. And Paul's words to the Philippians remind us of this calling to shine brightly through our obedience, our unity, and our joy. So let's dive right in. The book of Philippians is your light shining, as Paul encourages those that he's writing to, and by extension us, to obey the teachings of Jesus, avoid division, and hold on to the word of life so that our light shines brightly in a dark and divided world. We'll be reading from Philippians 2, verses 12 through 18. So then, my dear friends, just as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but even more in my absence, continue working out your salvation with awe and reverence. Some translations say fear and trembling. For the one bringing forth in you both the desire and the effort for the sake of his good pleasure is God. Now, obedience begins with the commands of Jesus, and it's not dependent on who's watching. Paul emphasizes that while it takes work, God provides both the desire and the effort. So he gets all the credit. And we're to work out our salvation with awe and reverence, fear, not being afraid of God as, some kind of evil tyrant, but fear of respect and reverence. And the difference between works and grace is who gets the credit. You see, grace isn't permission to sin. It's the power to change. And it takes work. It takes effort. It takes an attitude of awe and reverence. But both the effort and desire come from God. It's a gift that we receive as we follow Jesus. So how can we actively obey Jesus even when no one is watching, even when you're not gathered in church? What does it mean to rely on God's strength for both the desire and effort to follow him? Well, Paul goes on. This is some of the evidence that God is working through us as we work out our own salvation. Verses 14 through 16. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may be blameless and pure, children of God without blemish, though you live in a crooked and perverse society, in which you shine as lights in the world, by holding on to the word of life, so that I will have a reason to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run in vain, nor labor in vain. You see, arguing and division have become normal in our society, but they shouldn't be. Paul says to do everything without grumbling or arguing. Why? Because that's how your light shines in a dark world. You can't turn the dark off. You have to turn the light on. And there's so much focus today on proving how dark the world is, but what we really need to be doing is shining the light and proving that Jesus is the way. And we do that by holding on to the word of life. Now, it's not just doctrine, it's Jesus himself. He is the word of life. And I believe that's why Jesus instructed us to go make disciples by teaching them to obey all the things that he commanded. Because following Jesus begins with the commands of Jesus. And we build from that foundation, and we hold on to those words of life, which is Jesus himself. Now, it's a little confusing here. Why does Paul hope for boasting rights? Well, it's not pride, but a joy in seeing the fruit of his labor in their obedience. You see, for a Jesus follower, your good fruit often grows on others' tree. How can avoiding grumbling, complaining, arguing, and holding on to Jesus help you shine brightly this week? We're told to do everything that way so that we can be blameless and pure. We can be known as children of God, even though we live in a broken world. That's why Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." We make peace by shining the light of Jesus and following what he said. And the good news is, you don't have to have the power or strength to do that. God provides both the desire and the effort to accomplish his will. Let's go on. Verse 17 and 18. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice together with all of you. And in the same way, you also should be glad and rejoice together with me. Paul expresses something that is very countercultural today. He expresses joy in difficulty, joy in being poured out for the faith of others. And he also calls the Philippians to share in that joy. Sacrificial service, even when it costs us, is an act of obedience and worship that reflects the right of Christ, or the light, rather, of Christ. How can you embrace sacrificial service with joy? We've talked about that over the past few weeks, how that our concern and our attitude should be that of Christ, who wasn't concerned with his own needs, but for the needs of others. And when that is your focus, even when the circumstances turn against you, you can with joy rejoice because of the fruit that Jesus is bringing in your life and in those that you serve. So who can you serve this week in a way that reflects Christ's love, Christ in you, the hope of glory? Our command verses for this week, a little bit different. Normally, we try to focus on just the commands of Jesus, but here is Paul kind of explaining how to put those commands into practical application in our lives. Our command verses from Ephesians 5, 6 through 10, where it says, "Let nobody deceive you with empty words, for because of these things, God's wrath comes on the sons of disobedience." God's wrath against empty words. Verse 7, "Therefore, do not be partakers with them, for you were at one time darkness." You've got that? "But now you are light in the world. Walk as children of the light. For the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord." That goes back to the concept of working out our own salvation. Paul calls us to walk as children of light, producing fruit in goodness, righteousness, and truth. Living as light means reflecting Jesus in everything you do. And part of that process is trying to learn. But the good news that we talked about today is that God provides that very desire and that very effort. And how we know that we are on the right path is we look at the words of Jesus. We look at his commands. We look at his example. And when we see that kind of light in our own life, that's God at work in you. That's where we notice the fruit of the Spirit, and that's where we don't see the works of the flesh. So how can you let your light shine in a way that pleases God this week? That's our job as a Jesus follower. And the best news of all is that you don't have to have the strength, you don't have to have the know-how, you just have to follow Jesus, and God will do the rest. Thank you so much for being a part of this All Together podcast. I hope this has been encouraging for you this morning. If you're watching this live and you're in the Weatherford, Texas area, you still have time to join with us at Ironworks Coffee. It's very informal. We'll have some acoustic worship. I'm having difficulty talking today. And we'll read some scripture, discuss, enjoy one another's company, and some great Ironworks coffee, and just follow Jesus together. Hope to see you there. But this podcast is to help you stay connected if you can't. And remember, follow Jesus today. Love first.